Alright friends, listen, this is going to be kind of an interesting video because I'm currently studying, researching, watching, reading, did I say reading already? Everything that I possibly can about Kratom, bodybuilding, steroids, hormones. Yeah, that's about it. And the association between all of them. Now, little backlog, and the reason for all of this. I've been taking Kratom every day, Kratom, yes, for the past 7 years. I've been living in severe chronic pain due to some spinal issues, injuries, nerve damage down my legs. Now, that was my alternative to pain meds because I was in a car accident 9 years ago and I had organ failure in 2003. And in those situations, I had taken a lot of pain meds, and I didn't want to go back down that road long term. You know what I mean? I didn't want to stay on them every day, all day. So I went to Kratom. And it has been an amazing blessing. So the first thing I need to say is that Kratom is a blessing. Kratom is an amazing product. Kratom should be legal and available to all people. But most people are ignorant to what they're taking. And this is where the problem lies. I have been having some severe issues because of my Kratom intake. So we need to talk about that. So I also have a brain injury. I was hit by one of my dump trucks 6 years ago now. And it hit... Oh, that's the other thing I'm studying. TBIs. There you go. My brain injury was the back end of my dump truck broke free off of a big Mason body truck, cracked my skull, and bruised my brain right here. Well, do you know what's in that frontal lobe area? The pituitary gland. So hence, a lot of the things that I'm studying now are very intertwined. I've been taking Kratom for 7 years, almost 7 years daily, and I am in high doses. I don't feel it. All it does is maintain normal for me, that normal baseline. And I have to take, I'm probably taking about 30 grams a day right now, and I've tried to get off many times, but Kratom withdrawal is severe. It's wicked. It's terrible. For me, it's the worst withdrawal than any narcotic. I would rather withdraw from any narcotic than from Kratom. Now, I've also been bodybuilding for 25 years. I did 23 years naturally, and the past almost 3 years now, I have been doing on TRT with light doses of 80 milligrams a week of decadurabolin and a little more before my spinal surgery. And that did allow me to get through my pains and my ailments. But the reason that this is so important to me is because TRT, taking testosterone, and let's say other anabolics, while taking Kratom with a brain injury, is essentially a big cluster of competition for regulating my hormones, let's say. Because remember, my brain injury is the frontal lobe. There's a lot of really important things in the frontal lobe. Kratom directly affects the pituitary gland in many ways. Kratom directly raises prolactin levels. Prolactin regulates behavior, the immune system, metabolism, reproductive systems, and many different bodily fluids. This makes prolactin a crucial hormone for overall health and well-being for men and women. Production of prolactin is controlled by two main hormones, dopamine and estrogen. Now, on anabolics or steroids, your estrogen is heavily impacted. Then you also have to factor in an aromatizing inhibitor. Then you also have to factor in if you're taking HCG during, before, after. Then if you're blasting a cycle. Do you see all these crazy things? And at the center of it for me, I feel that Kratom is f***ing me up. Is really messing with all this stuff. Now, Kratom hits the opioid receptors. And all drugs that hit the opioid receptors typically, I believe, raise prolactin levels. But Kratom is noticed first in the brain, then in the spinal column, then in the nervous system. Like, Kratom gets all encompassed up in that body. That's the problem with daily heavy use of Kratom. And then also, here's another thing. Where does SHBG come into play with this? Does Kratom affect the sex hormone binding globulin? It probably does, right? And then steroids and anabolics also affect your SHBG heavily. So are they protagonists in affecting SHBG together? Or is Kratom just an antagonist to all of these other things? Then throw in my brain injury. You see what I'm saying? Like it's wild. Like it's like this big maze of cluster F, you know? So basically where it starts is the hypothalamus signals to the pituitary gland to make these hormones. But like for someone with head trauma or brain injury or some type of like severe eating disorders, things like that, the hypothalamus can be affected in negative ways. The hypothalamus cannot regulate properly. And so if the hypothalamus is not functioning properly, then the pituitary gland isn't going to be able to do its job the right way, right? So your hormone levels are going to be all over the place, fluctuating here and there, depending on what that trauma is. Which is why omegas, your omega-3s, fish, your fatty acids, those are so important for keeping a healthy hypothalamus. So anyone who tells you that taking your omegas is a waste of time clearly doesn't really know anything about the body. Now listen, let's be real. Kratom is such an amazing product and that it's natural from the earth that you almost want to just say, well, yeah, don't abuse it and it's a blessing. Which is true, right? Don't abuse it and it will be such a blessing. But the problem is it's not necessarily just abusing it, it's a great alternative for a lot of us. But it can really mess with your other systems. And as a bodybuilder who's now focusing on getting my physique back to where I want it to be or to where I've never had it before because I can feel my legs again and hopefully work my legs out. I haven't been able to work out legs in like 10 years. So I'm really excited to delve deeper into the world of medically prescribed PEDs to kind of get back all the work I've put into it for 23 years without getting to reap the benefits. Because I'm literally the most hard-gaining ectomorph you'll ever meet. But I've also maintained a high metabolism my entire life from being very active and working very hard consistently. Now another question I have is, does Kratom affect LH, the luteinizing hormone? Because LH is made in the pituitary gland, right? So does Kratom directly affect LH? If Kratom raises prolactin levels, which I can attest to you it does, and I made a whole other video on why my doctors thought I had prostate cancer, because my prolactin levels were at supraphysiological levels. That's not good. Turns out it wasn't cancer, it was the daily use of Kratom. Now another thing that's commonly discussed is dopamine. Now dopamine imbalances can also lead to addiction and ADHD and schizophrenia and things like that. So dopamine is a really important part of this whole process. So dopamine basically controls our responses to situations. If you think of it this way, dopamine is basically the feeling and the touching of a hot stove and pulling your hand back. Dopamine signals your body to do that. And I can tell you that I drop a lot of things and I'm shaking after high doses of Kratom. I mean, I have a hard time writing, I'm shaking so much sometimes. I drop a lot of things. But see, I also have nerve damage from a car accident 9 years ago and from my spinal surgery. Now, Kratom heavily affects things like libido and sex functions, maintaining an erection. Like I said, for women, it also can kind of numb and delay certain sexual feelings. So higher levels of Kratom, especially reds and greens, make it so that I couldn't even maintain an erection if I wanted to, you know? But the weird thing is that it's also harder to urinate. It's harder to push. Now, for me, I'm somebody who making love is very important, and intimacy, I think, is crucial. So there's no way I want Kratom affecting that. So I would end up, so to counteract the Kratom, I started to try Viagra, the sildenafil, because Kratom made it so I couldn't even get hard. And then Viagra, now you know, I just realized after all that there's barely any light in this room. Sorry, guys. No, wow, that's a lot better. All right, now here's the thing. Maybe a lot of you don't even take Kratom. You're not affected by it. But there's also a big problem with opioids, and obviously we know a lot about that addiction. But opioids also affect the hormones. And so that can be competing with your test regulation, with your estrogen production, with your estrogen control, and then that can lead to crashing your E, which can lead to depression and worse. So this stuff is so important, especially if you're going to be taking any kind of androgens. Now for me, here's an example. My TRT regimen is 250 a week of tescipionate and typically 80 to 120 milligrams a week of DECA. Now I'm going to be getting off DECA soon because I just had my spinal fusion and I need a break. I've actually been on DECA pretty consistently for 3 years now, approaching 3 years. I have wonderful things to say about that experience and what it's done for my life and my lifestyle and for my health. But now I've got to take a break for that. Now remember, you've got testosterone, testosterone derivatives, DHT derivatives, and then obviously your 19-nors, your nandrolones. Now there's a big difference between those categories, but they affect estrogen in so many different ways that many guys aren't even aware of. And so estrogen plays such a role in your overall health, well-being, and wellness. And so you got to get your blood work done if you're doing this stuff. You know, we're losing guys left and right, heart attacks, you know, all this stuff, these problems and deaths. It's got to stop. Do your blood work. Now I can tell you, last time I got my blood work done, my estradiol was within range. But I could tell it was low. It felt low. I felt crashed. I felt lethargic and tired. But the problem for me is I also have a brain injury. So I don't know what part of it is my brain injury versus my estrogen versus kratom intake versus anything else. So I've got to get to a point where I can separate these things and kind of start to compartmentalize what each of them is doing to my body. Now, really what this video is I'm also opening up a forum for discussion. I'm really interested in it because obviously it's affecting me very heavily every day. Again, I've got this crazy circle of competing antagonists, and I can't figure out why the hell I'm not getting big. Because even on a blast, even with a good diet, even with consuming my calories, and even with pushing it hard in the gym, I'm either such a hard gainer or a non-responder. Non-responder to all you fake men. But with the way that I train, my diet, and now with the exogenous hormones that I'm consuming, I should be pretty big compared to most other people's experiences if they're being honest about those experiences. But I'm not. And there's a reason for it. And I wonder, is kratom keeping me small? That's my question. Ultimately, my question is, I've got the brain injury. I have to remove that for now. I can't control that. It is what it is. I'll have that forever. Kratom is a consumable. I could cut it out if I can get through the nasty withdrawal. And if it's keeping me small and hindering my body's ability to utilize these exogenous hormones, I want to get the F off right away. And it makes sense. It makes sense that it's competing with everything else to control, regulate, and maintain my hormones. Those hormones are what make us who we are. So I got to get to the bottom of this. I want to do it soon. So if anybody's got any ideas, I want to hear about them. Steve, Leo, Derek, let's open up a conversation because this shit has to be figured out. And I got to get big. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please subscribe to the channel. Stick around. I got a lot of videos coming from my 25 plus years of experience in the fitness industry. Most of it natty and all of it as a hard gainer. Call me Mr. Hard Gains. I'll catch you in the next one.